Good afternoon. Yeah. It's been an enlightening day for many of you already. So we've gotten an esteemed panel here, which I'd like to introduce in a few seconds. The topic today is about digital health, right? And digital health means so many things to so many people, especially in the room today. So depending on the vantage point you have on the value chain, whether you're a manufacturer, so how do we use digital health to be able to get more insight and information and data coupled with a clinical trial data to be able to launch more efficacious products in a speedy manner? If you're a provider, it's about how does it help me in the continuum of care, right? How can I make it more cost effective to treat my patients? How can I improve the outcomes for my patients? If you're a payer, well, what do we have to do to absolutely reduce the cost of healthcare and steer our patients to the highest performing providers at the lowest cost? How do we drive adherence with many of our patients to be able to make their therapies more effectively? So you can already see that depending on where you are in the value chain, digital health means so many things to so many people. So we've got a wonderful panel here. We've got Jeff Elton from Concerto AI, who brings a wealth of insight and information in dealing with companies, again, across the value chain itself. Congrats to Jeff. He just launched a solution with Bristol Myers Squibb this morning on RWD, really absolutely harnessing the power of digital health. You've got Marcello Damiani, incredible Chief Digital Officer for Moderna Therapeutics. You know, I implement this for a living. I implement digital supply networks and build the digital infrastructure for many, many companies. Many of you are in the room today, but I've yet to see someone succeed to the level that Marcello has at Moderna, where he's been able to digitize the entire value chain. But, you know, that's half the battle. So what is he doing to really use that insight and information and from an organizational perspective? We'll talk a little bit about that. Catherine Garside, Thermo Fisher, right? Amazing outreach into developing ecosystems of digital health solutions and players, and thinking about how their customers are enabled with their platforms. Luba Greenwood from Google, right? How do we harness the power that Google brings to the table and be able to launch digital solutions in the marketplace? How do we learn from some of the mistakes that we've made? And what does it mean to have a fantastic innovation that doesn't go anywhere? Like, what are some of the learnings that we can learn from her experiences in this space over here? And last but certainly not least, Brooke Page, Pear Therapeutics, right? Digital therapeutics. Well, that's not even the cutting edge. It's the bleeding edge, right? Where is this going in this space? What about data and data privacy in this realm which doesn't really have boundaries, right? So, outstanding discussion to be had. For the next 30 minutes or so, we'll have a deep discussion with the panel. I'm going to open it up to the audience, open mic it, so anybody has any questions, please raise your hand, and there's somebody around with a mic who'll give it to you. And if you feel compelled within the discussion itself to ask a question or share an anecdote, well, you know, we all equals here. We all have something to share. Please don't hesitate either, right? This is meant to be a very active dialogue. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to please spend a couple of minutes. Jeff, we'll start with you. Just introduce yourself and your viewpoint on digital health.
All right, thanks, Hussain. And I'm going to always let you do my intros for me, so thank you. Jeff Elton, the CEO of Concerta Health AI. We're a somewhat recently formed entity. We're made up of two entities that we started up to that we acquired, have now integrated them together and relocated ourselves and our headquarters here to the Boston, Cambridge area. The work that we do, which gives a little bit of context for how I think about digital, is actually it goes from the provider setting where patient care is administered all the way over to how do I get an insight into different treatment strategies, different alternative study designs, and then how do I redeploy those all the way back into the electronic health environment from which I got the original data. And so the notion here is you've actually got an end-to-end, uninterrupted data analytic insight to next generation solution chain. We are a 10-year exclusive partner with the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And I say that because in an area where ethics and how you begin to change and modify and set a standard for how you use data, working with institutions like that is actually a critical part of that. And I think that's where, for us, those ethics are part of it. And then we are heavy believers in the application of AI. And even though some of the articles in journals may counter-argue that, I'd be happy to talk about that later on. We see lots of useful applications of where that's coming to play, and we actually believe that will become integral to the healthcare system. So for us, this idea that you actually use the data around and where care occurs to actually think about how do you improve that, how do you think about new therapeutic strategies, and how do you enable that and stay in that environment and keep everything as real world-like as possible is absolutely critical, and that's what we're kind of focused on.
So Marcello Damiani, I'm the Chief Digital and Operational Excellence Officer at Moderna. Mainly my background, I started my career as a software engineer working on launching software and satellite to the space, then moved into the high-tech industry, and then moved into the life science industry. And I found this industry so fascinating that I've been spending the last 10 years working on how we make digital reality in where I was. And if you look Moderna, so what Moderna is working on is a new generation of medicine by which you instruct the cell to produce protein. And if you look at it, the instruction you send to the cell is information. So data for us is key. So when we started building all the digital landscape and all the information setting at Moderna, we made sure that we integrated automation and digitization at every step of the company. So this is how we built the company from the beginning, from greenfield. And as we grow, this data is now available to us to make informed decisions. So not only we have the data now, but we are able to start to making some analytics on this data and use some of the AI and the machine learning that can help us improve on the science. So this is mainly what Hussein referred to. What we are building, I think, is not unique, but is different because we looked at full integration. So we started building on new technologies like the cloud. We made sure that we have integration across the whole spectrum. We made sure that we have technologies like IoT, like sensors, et cetera, embedded in our strategy, connected devices, connected instrument into the information system, so we have the data available. And then we put automation to make sure that we are collecting this data with less variability than if it was done manually. So, and then when you have all this in place, you use the data to make decisions. So this is mainly what we've built.
Very good. Catherine Garside. So I lead our eSolutions business development team globally for Thermo Fisher Scientific. And my background, I started in biochemistry around oncology specifically, and then moved into Thermo Fisher and have supported Thermo Fisher for about 8 years in a lot of different commercial capacities. Within the last 2 years, I moved into this digital space. And so how I got here was really looking at the trends with our key customers around how we're truly going to differentiate the scientific experience holistically. And you know, Thermo Fisher's approach to this, right? We are here to enable our customers to make the world cleaner, healthier, and safer, right? And so on a part of that journey, it's critically important that we leverage all of those parts to drive the scientific acceleration as one of our big value proposition components, scientific acceleration, and driving productivity. And we do that across a number of our digital capabilities, inclusive of e-commerce platforms, our inventory management platforms, our instruments and connectivity components, to build what is going to be a very large ecosystem to drive customer value in those particular areas. We can go a little bit deeper into what that means, and I think we will across the panel. AI, machine learning is a big part of what we're leveraging. I think we're early, so we've set a 2030 vision to be the world's leading digital science company. And what we need to do that across a very, very large business is work on integrating those data components that we have. And I think as you mentioned, you know, you've really, as a company, kind of pulled that all together. We are on that journey of data integration today. So I'm sure we'll get into more of those parts as we continue the discussion.
Great. Luba Greenwood, and I started in my career actually as a scientist in biochemistry and neuroscience.
Oh, very good.
It's always a good place to start. And then I went a bit on the dark side, became a litigator actually, an intellectual property litigator, and went into the regulatory side as well. And that has carried me through, and it's interesting because at the time, the value of a lot of the companies in the life sciences space really came from that IP. And so the idea of even thinking about, okay, data was something that you use to show that your science actually worked. The idea of thinking data as value, as driving value, and how do you share data, how do you access data, that was not really part of the discussion, not really part of the conversation. So I went into, and I did represent both the tech side and the life sciences side when I was at WilmerHale for about 8 years, and then I went in the last 10 years spent on the business and the venture side. Mostly on the life sciences and the biotech space, tool space, device space, diagnostic space. Before Google, I was at Roche on the diagnostic side. And as we actually had the privilege really to do some of the biggest and still to this day, some of the most exciting acquisitions of pharma, of digital health companies, such as, you know, if you look at Flatiron or MySugar, which is a chronic disease management tool. As we're doing those acquisitions and really leading forward the space of pharma getting into the digital health space, one of the things that became very clear to me is that we still had a pretty hard time understanding what is this AI, deep learning, is that the same thing? What is this, right? And what is this data integration piece? How does this actually work? When we're doing diligence, it's very easy to do diligence when and as you are all here, most of you I would imagine come from science. You may be in digital today, but probably many of you, I would think, have come from science. When you do due diligence or investment or for acquisition, or even building out your company as Moderna on trying to figure out what actually works, when you do your due diligence, you go into a lab, usually most of the time, and you see how this works, and you kind of get it. When I was doing it, I would go in, and all I saw were a bunch of computers. There were black screens with, you know, a bunch of white numbers on it, and I had no idea what is this stuff, right? And I thought, listen, it's easy for us, and sometimes in healthcare, to judge some of those crazy tech people from the West Coast that want to get into our space. But I felt the same way for me. I really needed to get into that tech space to really understand what do we truly mean by data? How does it actually look? How can we leverage it in order to improve our discovery tools, improve our tool space, improve our clinical trials, and improve actually and empower the patients so that we can provide the data for providers and payers that actually improve outcomes at a lower cost. And so that's one of the things that we're doing, really, when you think about where's Google going, where's Amazon going, where are all these tech companies going? They're going into your space. And they're coming here. What's exciting is they are coming here to Massachusetts because it is the state of possible. And one of the things I had the privilege of working with Bob and Kendall and the MassBio team really on the digital health report, because really this is the place where if you see all the tech and the pharma and the biotech is coming and converging here into the space, into Massachusetts, because we have those tools. We actually have the place where you can truly leverage the digital piece for science, for life sciences, and to make better drugs and therapies for patients. So that's what we're doing in many tech companies, and hopefully we can all do here in Massachusetts.
Great. And I'm Brooke Page. I'm Vice President of Alliance Management from Pear Therapeutics. And you might know that Pear Therapeutics has the first FDA-cleared prescription digital therapeutics. So essentially, software as a medical device, a very pioneering field. We were speaking earlier this week, and I was saying that our perspective on digital is that the PDT area really is its own unique space. And our Chief Strategy Officer, Alex Waldron of Pear, likes to say that we are essentially the platypus of tech and biotech. So we are very similar, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but not really that. So we're kind of our own animal. So we see ourselves as really being privileged to be pioneering in this space.
You know, building a digital health company, building digital health solutions and launching them, it's not easy, right? I mean, that's the panel will testify to that. There are so many barriers to entry, right? There's the alliance and ecosystem, which Brooke mentioned. There's the talent piece. There's the operating models design that needs to be put in place. There's the patient privacy that needs to be taken care of. I mean, for God's sakes, if it was that easy, New York would be doing it, right? But again, I want to pick up what Luba said. Testament to Bob and Kendall and the MassBio team, closely supported by the board. They've done an excellent job at making sure that let's identify the barriers for all of you in this room today. Then how can we make it easier to be working in New England, to be able to develop, attract, and make successful more and more digital health companies, either from a startup perspective or as companies pivot into the space. But let's talk a little bit about the barriers to entry, right? So Brooke, maybe we start with you, and let's talk a little bit about building that alliance and ecosystem. You can have the most fantastic innovation in the world, but if you don't have the network to be able to support and launch it and make it successful, you're not going to get anywhere.
Absolutely. So I was just speaking to our Chief Medical Officer about this the other day, and it's so interesting to me that when we're talking about hard tech, that it's really soft skills that can make or break success of these alliance collaborations. And we've been partnering with Novartis quite extensively at Pear. We have development programs in schizophrenia and MS with Novartis. And I have been so consistently impressed with their leadership and exceptionally how they have gone about partnering with us. So a few examples of how to build the alliance ecosystem, which is the essence of the question here. We have seen incredibly strong engagement by senior leadership, and that is really, really unparalleled. So for instance, when we signed our development deal with Novartis, it was Jay Bradner himself at NIBR who sat down with the alliance teams and said, if anything gets in the way of pulling through value from these collaborations, I want to be the first one to hear about it. So that sort of buy-in, that sort of sponsorship, that sort of endorsement, I think is incredible, and it's something that's very unique here as well. I also think there's a certain amount of open-mindedness that needs to happen, and again, this is something that Novartis has demonstrated incredible strength in. For the PDT space, we're essentially building the plane as we're flying it, so we don't have all of the answers. And Novartis in particular has been so flexible in their internal processes to adapt and provide an environment for innovation for PDTs to flourish. So for instance, I am often in my role as alliance manager going to my alliance colleague and saying, hey, tell me about what's the process for approval, getting access to these resources to pull this through. And she'll say, well, you know, this is the Novartis process, but this is what we're going to do for prescription digital therapeutics. So that sort of flexibility is something that I think is really incredible.
So talent's a big portion of this, right? One of the findings from this report that we worked on was you absolutely need a continuous flow of talent in this space, and it's continuously changing. Jeff, you've got a unique experience coming at it from you've been at within the four walls of a manufacturer. You've been in consulting where you've seen, some great talent there. You're now on the solution side of the house. So what's your viewpoint on talent and enabling fueling the digital health energy in this space?
Yeah, so as some people here know, I'm a big fan of the talent that we produce in this particular region. So I think if I kind of go back, started off by helping build the Novartis group facilities and infrastructure here. And when we had an opportunity, we were putting together this company, we decided to kind of locate ourselves here. Now, I think part of this is, one, we're about technology, but we couldn't do the technology if we didn't have the world's leading talent. And the talent we need to understand data and actually have techniques that understand data and the latest approaches to doing that. But they also have to understand clinical attributes, disease attributes, but they also have to understand the practicality of the clinical context and setting where solutions may be deployed. That's a tough set of combinations to interact in kind of the same kind of, working team and kind of bringing that together. And I think one of the, let me localize it to this particular region, I think we have a very unique set of institutions and entities here. The provider system actually is the one that actually does a lot of the research enterprise here, as opposed to research sitting only in a university setting. So you're already, just from the onset of innovation, you actually have a set thinking about application. And I think that's a big catalyst also for moving over to the biopharma side, but I think it's also now applying to decision sciences, AI, machine learning, and digital therapies as well.
So not to put you on the spot, but I
Sure.
will.
Okay, go for it.
In life sciences and healthcare, we are a pretty incestuous bunch in the sense that we always poach from each other's companies. We kind of grow up within the one industry, and you see very few
Sure.
outside folks come into our industry, right? So what do you do? What are some innovative ways to develop talent that you've seen in the marketplace, especially in this area, in the digital health area?
Yeah, so I think just to be clear, we moved our probably largest base of operation and growth here. But I think one, even when you're in this particular region, you need to be cognizant that you need to be aware of other regions, and you need to be aware of other sources of excellence too. So I mean, we kind of have 3 or 4 other locations, and actually I think that makes you a better steward of the town where you are. You can't kind of get over mesmerized because it's a global, and particularly when you're talking about digital activities can occur anywhere. I mean, digital activities can actually have people involving in doing things, and we have a global, we're 400 people, we have a global confederated network. But I think part of it has to do with you're going to recruit people that may not come with actually clinical domain expertise, but come with methodological expertise. You're going to get them working with the world's best clinical expertise, and how you form and how you create teams and how you set up, how you frame questions, how you drive your collaborations, what you decide your products are going to be, can all actually assure that you're going to get that integrated and develop as solutions. In digital, you don't get to the end state with the first incarnation. You get to a meaningful state that you're going to continue to work on, and you're actually going to have faster cycles of iteration and much faster cycles of learning than you did when I was on kind of therapeutic side.
So let me pick up on that one, Luba.
Wait, yeah.
So Google, highly innovative company, very admired. What do you, now you've learned the way to put ecosystem and partnership and alliance together. You've just heard, some great views on talent. What's the drawing and lessons learned from Google that you can apply in this space to be able to, drive the process of innovation and make it more successful? Do you fail fast? Do you continue to persevere, right? What are some, how do you develop the operating model that makes you successful? What are your thoughts on that one?
So thank you, and also thanks to you. I know we've had many of these conversations. Hussein and his Deloitte team has been working with us in MassBio and thinking through these things exactly. Is it a talent issue, right? Is it that we don't have the talent? Is it a mentorship issue? And it's actually not really issue, right? It's not really so much of a challenge. I think if you think about, if you're going to start up a biotech company, right? I like to give concrete examples. If you're starting a biotech company here, pretty much you can either find a mentor, or you probably, through being as a postdoc in many of the amazing institutions that we have here, you know exactly what you need to do, right? You know where you find a lab space, you understand how many people you need to put in the lab space. If you do animal models, you understand where to get your animals, how many cages, how much it costs, what are you going to do. If you want to do manufacturing, you know where to go and do this manufacturing. I have to say that I'm sure if I ask many people in the life sciences, well, how do you actually make a product stack? Or what's a SWE, Bob's favorite word, which means software engineer. Many of them, even though that work for a pharma company that says that they're in the digital space, will look at you with a blank stare. And it's not a talent issue, actually. We have some of the best SWEs graduating from MIT and Harvard and other amazing institutions around here. We have the best medical students. We have 3 of the top medical students in the country. We have the best hospitals that are training some of the amazing clinicians that are seeing some of the toughest cases really out there in every single indication. We have amazing data sciences. We have the likes of John Brownstein and Zach Kahane at Harvard and MIT, and we have at Dana-Farber, we have Sigal, we have amazing people. We have all the talent right here. A lot of what we don't have is the mentorship. People on top that can actually tell you, oh, so if you would like to apply AI, or there is no such thing, by the way, as really true AI yet in healthcare. If you want to apply deep learning, this is how you get your data. This is who do you partner? And I have to say, Paris does an amazing job because they really know where to go and to find that partner to get the right data, right? So you have to ask, where do you get the right data? Who do you partner with? How does the data look? Is this enough data? How do you annotate it? How do you clean it? What are the patent rights? What are the regulatory pathways? And as John said, you're absolutely right. There's a V1, V2, V3. How do you get through that? How do you get funding for it, right? We really are truly lacking, and this is not, and I think actually Massachusetts is the best place for it. I can tell you it's lacking in California even more so. True talent and mentorship at the top of people that truly understand life sciences and healthcare industry that can guide these innovators and tell them, here's how you get your data, here's how you make it effective, and here's how you get the data so that you can truly apply analytics and discovery in your clinical tools, in your clinical trials, and then in the payer and provider tools.
Great. Marcello, you've built it. Have they come? Like, what are some of the challenges now within your organization to be able to use and leverage the great infrastructure and the capabilities that you've built at Moderna?
Well,
And
first,
be truthful about it.
I would like to add on the talent. I think what's key is cross-pollination between computer, data scientists, and scientists. I think this is the key to the success. And when you look at it, either you have computer scientists or scientists, and more we're seeing. I mean, I've been at a roundtable at MIT. More and more we have a cross-pollination, and I think this is key. So this is one of the things that is a barrier and that you need to work on. I think the other barriers that you see as well is top management, making sure that top management understand the impact of those new technologies coming to the life science industry. And I think this is
That's
key.
a great point.
And you need the full support from the top management to be able to enforce. Because at the end of the day, it's about discipline and making sure that you're collecting the data so you can use this data to make decisions. And usually what you face is in early stage biotechs, and this is my experience, is there's little investment in making sure that we are collecting the data. And you grow like this, and you can become a very big company. But what you've built, if you've built inefficiencies at every steps of the process, and to retrofit costs lots of energy, resistance, and money. And many of the companies don't put this effort in to be able to go back and retrofit. And you need literally to go from a blueprint, a new blueprint, and define a strategy how to go back to a digital environment. And I think this is key.
Can I just add? So I absolutely agree. I think that's such an important point. Just to add to that exactly, which is that when I talk to, for example, venture firms, right, and venture says, oh, we're not in digital. I said, well, do you value data? Yes. Do your biotechs collect data? Yes. Is it important for your research to understand mechanism of action? The answer is yes. I said, well, where's the CDO, right? Well, I understand that not every biotech, right, can have a CDO and not every biotech can have it, but I said, if you look at many of the large venture capital companies, they have a CBO role, right? Basically, CBO at the venture company that helps you set up all of your biotechs. I said, why don't you just have one person? Just have one CDO at Flagship and Third Rock and Atlas and all of them, right? That can actually help and guide to do exactly to your point. And the answer is, I don't know. I think that's one of the things that we can do is actually have that person.
And the cost of entry when you start from the beginning is way less than the cost of entry when you're 10,000 people. And I think this is becoming a reality more and more, especially that data is becoming key in improving clinical trials and improving even the research side. On our sides, we work on the research part to implement some very sophisticated algorithmics and so on. So
good point, Luba. How do we innovate around the operating model to make this more successful, right? So, Marcello, you brought up the data piece, right? So data continuously, as we were doing this study, we spoke to a large number of payers, providers, of course, the manufacturers themselves, solution providers, consulting companies. And again, one of the big issues and challenges that we came across was, the two sides of the value chain had this healthy tension about data. Well, the manufacturers are like, the providers talk a good game, but oh my God, it's like pulling teeth when you go to ask them to share the data because they don't have the resources, and rightly so, they want us to invest in it. But how do we develop those joint incentives, right? How do we create that joint value? North Carolina, BCBS in North Carolina, I don't know if any of you have caught the news lately. I know somebody working on that deal, and it's just fabulous. It's an unprecedented example where BCBS North Carolina is now going to be sharing data with 5 of the largest systems there and then moving into an ACO environment. So they've actually unlocked all their vaults and said, come use this data, but we are going to hold you accountable, right? Bring in the manufacturers if you want, take all of this information and insight, obviously in a secure environment, but we're going to hold you accountable for outcomes now. And we're going to arm you with that information and that data. So we're going to see a lot more of those dominoes fall. But, Catherine, you guys have done a phenomenal job with your strategy and taking it to the market and enabling a lot of your customers. Like, how do you create joint value? How do you create those joint incentives with your customers to be able to use your platforms, to be able to create win-win situations in the digital health environment?
Yeah, so I think the way that we partner with our customers is first, I think the most difficult thing is understanding each other and aligning on what those key priorities are as it relates to, in this case, healthcare. We support a lot of different markets, of course, across the scientific arena. And I think a lot of times that's where you can fail, right? Is just not being aligned on where we're going to put the resources and time. I know we talked previously about, actually with the customer alliances, just even getting a proper governance model, and that talks to a lot of what you spoke about as well, is making sure it's kind of a top-down approach and pushes forward. So for us, when we partner with our customers, the very first thing is understanding what the key priorities are, what we actually want to deliver together. We have a couple partnerships with Deloitte and Accenture and so on to help us through that. But the very first is customer readiness in order for us to partner together to deliver something compelling. And then setting in the actual operational governance models to deliver on that. And then actually come through with something that's truly differentiated from a customer journey perspective, if that makes sense. Basically, getting to that point of bringing value to the customer is very challenging for us. And I think that along the whole data integration component, we're still on a long journey to kind of get there together, define it with our customers. I'd say it's early days that we build something truly directly collaborative with a particular customer, in the case of Novartis and so on. We've made some good inroads there. But as I mentioned earlier, it's really for us right now more focused on how do we get all of Thermo Fisher Scientific across all of these excellent areas to come together in a truly meaningful way to drive that ultimate value.
Awesome. I'm going to open it up to the floor if there are any questions, and I'm going to call on a few people. So, Leslie, right? Dana-Farber. Do we have a mic back here? Sorry. Okay. I think we had a hand mic as well, though. Yep, there we are. Okay. So, Leslie, from the standpoint and vantage point of a provider, right? You're watching this huge tsunami of digital health come at you from the manufacturers. You're probably getting requests on a weekly basis for this and that, and collaboration and data and information and insight. Like, you are driving innovation at Dana-Farber. So what is your viewpoint on this based on what you just heard in the panel?
Yeah, so there's obviously so much impact that we can all have together by bringing our data and partnering with all of, maybe not all of your organizations, but some of your organizations to identify new ways of caring for our patients and new ways of developing therapies. But the challenge right now is that our data is not really usable, to Luba's point. We have some structured data. We have a lot of very unstructured data in our notes. And until we take the time, and we're starting to do this, but it's going to cost a lot of money to structure that data and put it all together in one place, we can't really dive into that data and do that deep learning. And the other thing, to the point of, yes, people are calling us every week to get access to our data, we can't sell our data, right? It's our patient's data. And so in order for us to use that data to get these new learnings, we really have to collaborate together. We have to do research together and learn things together that might allow us to develop new therapies and develop new treatments. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think on the digital health side, again, I think what Pear is doing is really exciting. I think at Dana-Farber, we have the opportunity to really dive into oncology care. The care that is provided at Dana-Farber is incredible. And if we can find ways to make that care more efficient by pairing it, more efficient, more effective, better, enhance it, right? Not hurt the care. We don't want to make it less, hands-on. So if we can pair the human with the digital to make the care even better, then that's another way that we're going to be able to move forward. And I do think, again, there are ways that we can partner with the industries in this room to do that exact kind of work, because you all are interested in that data, and we need to find ways to move that work forward. And sometimes that work needs to be funded. And so there are ways that we can do that research together.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Imran over there. Imran, can you take a few seconds to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name is Imran Nasrullah.
Wow, you don't need a mic.
My name's Imran Nasrullah, and I'm with Boehringer Ingelheim. So just trying to tie the themes of this event together from yesterday to today. I wanted to get your impressions around, well, I guess I'll preface this and say that, Kaiser Healthcare did a paper and it talked about, the electronic medical record from 10 years ago, and it cost $36 billion, and in the end it was kind of a wreck. And so on the cusp of digital health and looking at kind of the fiasco of what's going on in Washington with healthcare and who will pay for it, how do you see tying together all these different links around digital health, avoiding the costly mistakes of, let's say, electronic health records, and then who's going to pay for it all if you try to bring all of these grand themes together.
So I'm happy to take that on, Imran. And by the way, to your point that it's such an insular, we all know each other by first names. So Imran, a very good question and a great observation, I think, from the last 2 days. And digital health really, so you're absolutely right. There are so many pitfalls, and not just the EMR, right? I think there are some people, I think it was actually Abby Selnicker from Third Rock that said $2 to $3 billion have been literally thrown out in the trash for bad data. Absolutely. And this is where it comes back to, we really need actually real experts and that kind of the people that understand CS and data science and science all together to really understand where do we get the best data and how do we integrate the best data. So absolutely. I think when we're talking about, well, what about the cost? Who's going to pay for all of it? I actually see that digital health is the place where you can do the savings, right? This is why you see all the tech companies are going into the space, right? Because they recognize that through the use of right data and collecting the right data from the right sources and having the right people and through the right commercialization and scaling opportunities, you can actually truly improve outcomes and lower cost. So what does that mean, right? That means that you can actually personalize medicine, right? Because the data, and one of the things that Leslie said, right, their data is all over the place right now, right? So you need to take your imaging data, you need to take your clinical notes data, you need structured, unstructured, all different, and real world evidence data. You need to take all of that data, put it all together in order to gain true insights of how to personalize care for that particular individual. So what would that mean? That would mean that your cohort of the people you're treating is actually going to be smaller, right? So less people are going to be taking the medication. Your adherence to medication is going to increase, so that way it's going to be more effective and more cost effective. And you are actually going to be able to also prevent patients from going to the hospital. So there are many tech companies that are going into the space of keeping patients at home, taking care of the patients, and also in prevention and wellness. So I actually see that digital health, and I'm glad that we're at the end, the last panel, right? Because I do see, and I don't actually like the word digital health. It really is not digital. It's just data.
Oh, shucks, it's a good thing you to let us know that. Yeah.
Data it's just the use of data, right? It's the use of data that comes from biology, it comes from chemistry, it comes from all different sources, right? It's just the use of data to make better therapies, and they could be digital therapies, they could be non-biologics, they could be small molecules, whatever it is, it's just making it better for the patient.
Perfect. So this discussion can go on and on. There's so much to share, such great experience in the panel. Please give them a hand. Yeah. And, Jeff, Marcello, Catherine, Luba, Brooke, thank you so much.